What if parts of the United States decided they've had enough and packed their bags to go solo? From the tropical rebellion of Key West to the icy independence dreams of Alaska, some states and regions aren't just talking about change, they're flirting with full-blown separation. Could California really become its own country? Would Texas bring back the Republic? And who's seriously planning to join Idaho? Buckle up as we explore the 10 states that could actually break away from the US in the future. Which one do you think would make it? And would they survive on their own? Let's dive in. Number 10. Illinois. Alright, so let's head to the land of Lincoln, but not the part you're probably thinking of. Nope, not Chicago. We're talking about southern Illinois. That quiet patchwork of farms, small towns, and rolling hills where folks wave from their porches and politics lean way more red than blue. For years now, residents here have been feeling like the forgotten cousins in the Illinois family, overshadowed by the bustling megacity to the north, Chicago, with its 2.7 million people, glitzy skyline, and very different priorities. Down in southern Illinois, you've got counties where 70% or more of voters regularly choose conservative candidates, compared to urban Cook County, where Democrats routinely pull in 75 to 80% of the vote. That contrast? It's like sweet tea versus craft espresso. People in the South feel their values, gun rights, farming, religious freedom, are getting buried by big city politics. So, what's the plan? Some folks want to split the state entirely, creating a new one, sometimes dubbed New Illinois, or even joining neighboring states like Missouri or Indiana. Over 24 counties have passed resolutions expressing their desire to explore this split. Yep, actual official paperwork. They're not just venting on Facebook. And get this, the Chicago metro area makes up about 65% of the state's entire population and generates the lion's share of its tax revenue. But many southern residents argue they don't see those funds helping their communities, where median household incomes are often under $45,000, and small towns are battling aging infrastructure and declining populations. This isn't a full-blown rebellion, yet, but there's a real desire for local control, for being heard. And in today's era of polarization, that sentiment is only getting louder. Is Southern Illinois about to grab a state flag and declare independence? Probably not tomorrow. But the frustration's real, and the movement is gaining momentum faster than a tractor in an open field. So yeah, while Illinois might seem like one big blue blob on the map, remember, the southern counties are quietly plotting their own future, and they've got a whole lot of heart and a whole lot of corn behind them. Number 9. Florida. Alright, picture this. It's 1982. The sun is blazing over the turquoise waters of Key West. Jimmy Buffett is probably playing somewhere in the background. And the U.S. Border Patrol decides to set up a checkpoint on Highway 1, the only road in and out of the Florida Keys. People were furious, especially the locals. Imagine living in paradise and suddenly having to stop at a border-style checkpoint just to go get groceries from the mainland. That didn't sit well. So what did the people of Key West do? They declared independence. Yep, on April 23, 1982, Mayor Dennis Wardlow and the locals declared the Florida Keys the Conch Republic, raised their own flag, and even declared war on the U.S. for 1 minute, before immediately surrendering and requesting $1 billion in foreign aid. It was tongue-in-cheek, of course, but it became a movement, a brand, and even a source of tourism. Today, they still celebrate Independence Day with parades, mock battles, and parties. It's all very Key West, rebellious, laid back, and full of margaritas. But behind the laughs, there's a serious sentiment. The Keys often feel culturally distinct from mainland Florida. With just over 70,000 residents spread across this tropical island chain, many locals say the federal and state governments don't always understand or prioritize their unique needs, especially when it comes to environmental protection and tourism-driven policies. The region's economy relies on over 5 million annual visitors, and issues like hurricane recovery, infrastructure, and local business regulations feel deeply personal. So, is the Conch Republic truly trying to leave the U.S.? Not in a Civil War kind of way, but it is a symbol, a cheeky, defiant, sun-soaked reminder that small communities can stand up for themselves. The slogan? We seceded where others failed. And honestly, you gotta respect that salty island spirit. The Conch Republic might just be the coolest secession you've never heard of. It's a little slice of Caribbean rebellion, without ever leaving the United States. Number 8, Vermont. New England, where the maple syrup flows, the cows are happy, and independence runs deep in the green hills. Welcome to Vermont, the only U.S. state that was once its own independent republic. Yep, from 1777 to 1791, Vermont was its own country, complete with its own currency, postal system, and even a constitution that banned slavery, decades ahead of the curve. So when Vermonters talk about independence today, they've got historical receipts to back it up. Enter the Second Vermont Republic movement. This group argues that Vermont should secede from the U.S. and return to its independent roots. Why? A lot of reasons. They say the federal government is too bloated, too invasive, and too focused on corporate interests. Vermont, with just 645,000 residents, thrives on small-town charm, strong communities, and a deep connection to nature. Over 70% of the state is covered in forest, and farming is still a big deal. There are more cows than people in some counties. And politically, Vermont's got a bit of a split personality. It's known for its progressive politics. Senator Bernie Sanders calls it home. But it also has a strong streak of libertarian independence. You won't find billboards along highways here, they're banned, and Vermonters have a fierce sense of self-reliance. In fact, Vermont consistently ranks as one of the top states for civic participation and community involvement. The Second Vermont Republic isn't exactly mainstream, but it's not a joke either. Around 13% of voters in a 2007 poll said they'd support independence. That might not sound like a lot, but it's more than just a niche. The idea's been featured in national media, and while it hasn't hit the legislature yet, it pops up in town hall meetings, local papers, and indie blogs. Think of Vermont's independence movement like its famous cheddar cheese, sharp, mature, and distinctly regional. They're not angry revolutionaries, they're thoughtful, history-loving Vermonters who think maybe, just maybe, they were better off doing their own thing. After all, they've already done it once, and it worked out pretty well. Number 7, New Hampshire. New Hampshire, where the motto isn't just cool, it's basically a mission statement. Live free or die isn't just printed on license plates, it's stitched into the DNA of the Granite State. And in recent years, that spirit of freedom has taken a bold turn. A growing number of people in New Hampshire are saying, what if we just left the US altogether? Yep, we're talking about the New Hampshire independence movement. Fueled by a mix of libertarians, constitutionalists, and local control enthusiasts, this group believes New Hampshire would be better off as its own independent nation. After all, it already acts kind of like one. No sales tax, no income tax, super low crime rates, and one of the most decentralized state governments in the country. In 2022, things got real when several state representatives sponsored a constitutional amendment to secede from the Union. It didn't pass, but it got people talking and made national headlines. And there's actual political muscle behind it. The Free State Project, a movement that encourages libertarians to move to New Hampshire and create a freer society, has already brought over 6,000 people to the state, with thousands more pledging to come. With just 1.4 million residents, New Hampshire punches above its weight. It ranks near the top in education, healthcare, and quality of life, and it's consistently among the most economically free states in America. The logic? We're already thriving. Why not go all the way? Of course, secession is a legal and logistical nightmare. But in true New Hampshire fashion, this movement isn't about shouting or rebellion. It's about principles. It's about privacy, property rights, and the belief that smaller government is better government. There's even a group called Calexit that holds town meetings and has drafted plans for what independence could actually look like. Is New Hampshire about to throw tea in the harbor again? Probably not. But in a state where town meetings still run the show and every voter counts, the idea of self-rule isn't as crazy as it sounds. In New Hampshire, freedom isn't just a word, it's a way of life. And maybe, just maybe, it's a passport stamp waiting to happen. Number 6, Washington, and Oregon. Now imagine a country where lush rainforests, eco-conscious cities, indie coffee shops, and rugged coastlines all come together under one dreamy flag. Welcome to Cascadia, not a fantasy realm from a Netflix series, but a real secessionist idea shared by parts of Washington, Oregon, and even British Columbia in Canada. That's right, folks. Cascadia is a cross-border movement rooted in environmentalism, culture, and a deep love for the Pacific Northwest. So, what exactly is the Cascadia movement? Well, it's a vision for a bioregional republic where like-minded people who care about sustainability, progressive politics, and nature can unite. Think of it as the love child of Portland's quirkiness and Vancouver's green vibes. The idea has been around for decades, but it picked up steam after polarizing national elections and growing frustration with federal politics. People here often feel their values are out of sync with decisions being made in Washington, D.C. Here's the wild part. If Cascadia were a country, it'd have some serious power. Combined, Washington, Oregon, and British Columbia would make up a nation of over 17 million people with a GDP exceeding $1.6 trillion. That would place it among the top 15 economies in the world, bigger than Australia or South Korea. Oh, and tech giants like Amazon, Microsoft, and Nike? All homegrown in this region. But it's not just about money. Cascadians are proud of their forests, their coastline, their progressive cities, and their love for nature. Portland banned plastic bags before it was cool. Seattle's obsessed with clean energy. And British Columbia? It's one of Canada's greenest provinces. Of course, there are challenges. Cascadia would have to navigate international borders, economic treaties, and countless legal hurdles. But the sentiment remains strong, especially among younger generations who dream of a nation focused on climate action, equality, and innovation. In a world craving bold ideas, Cascadia stands out not just as a place, but as a possibility. It's more than trees and rain. It's about a shared identity that just might become its own flag someday. Number 5. Oregon. What if part of one state just wanted to join another instead of creating a brand new country? That's exactly what's happening in Eastern Oregon, where residents are saying, "Forget Portland, we're moving to Idaho." And no, this isn't a mass real estate exodus. It's called the Greater Idaho Movement, and it's gaining serious traction. Why are these rural Oregonians so eager to switch sides? It comes down to culture and politics. While Western Oregon, especially cities like Portland and Eugene, lean very liberal, Eastern Oregon is conservative, really conservative. In many counties, Donald Trump won over 75% of the vote in 2020, while in Portland, the opposite happened. That political whiplash has led to a sense that the rural voice just isn't being heard in state decisions. Here's the plan. Redraw the state boundary so that up to 15 counties in eastern and southern Oregon would become part of Idaho, a state that more closely matches their values on issues like gun rights, taxation, and education. Sounds far-fetched? Maybe. But the movement has real legs. So far, 12 counties have voted in favor of exploring the idea, passing ballot measures to push for discussions with state legislatures. Supporters point out that the combined population of these counties is about 500,000 people. Not a huge chunk of Oregon's total 4.3 million, but enough to make noise. They also argue that redrawing the line would reduce cultural tension and create more cohesive state governance. Critics, of course, say it's impractical. Moving borders would require approval from both state legislatures and Congress, which hasn't happened since West Virginia split from Virginia in the Civil War era. But the Greater Idaho folks are undeterred. They've got maps, petitions, and town hall meetings. They're serious and organized. In the end, it's less about geography and more about identity. These Eastern Oregonians feel like they've got more in common with Boise than with Portland, and they just want a state that gets them. Whether the borders move or not, the message is clear. Small towns are tired of being sidelined, and they're not afraid to color outside the lines to be heard. Number 4. Hawaii. Now let's take a tropical detour to the middle of the Pacific, where palm trees sway, volcanoes rumble, and a deep cultural history pulses beneath the postcard-perfect surface. Welcome to Hawaii, where the push for independence isn't just a modern-day movement. it's tied to a royal past. That's right, Hawaii was once an independent kingdom, and many Hawaiians want it to be again. Here's the backstory. Hawaii was a sovereign nation until 1893, when American businessmen and U.S. Marines overthrew Queen Liliuokalani in a coup. 5 years later, the islands were annexed by the U.S. without a formal treaty, a move that remains controversial today. In 1993, the U.S. government even issued a formal apology resolution, acknowledging that the overthrow was illegal. That's a big deal. Today, Hawaiian sovereignty groups like Kalahui, the Hawaiian Kingdom, and Nation of Hawaii argue for everything from federal recognition to full independence. And these aren't fringe movements. In a 2020 Office of Hawaiian Affairs survey, over 60% of Native Hawaiians expressed support for some form of sovereignty. This isn't just about flags or politics. It's about land, culture, and respect. Native Hawaiians make up about 21% of the state's population, but they face disproportionate challenges in health, housing, and income. The cost of living in Hawaii is sky high. The average home price on Oahu is over $1 million, and groceries are around 61% higher than the national average. Many sovereignty advocates believe that local control could help fix these imbalances and preserve Hawaiian traditions. And then there's the cultural side. Hawaii has its own language, its own monarchy history, and a deep-rooted sense of Aina, or connection to the land. Independence movements tap into that spiritual connection, blending modern activism with ancient values. Would secession happen easily? Of course not. But in the Aloha State, the sovereignty movement is growing stronger with each passing year. It's not just a political idea, it's a cultural renaissance. And for many Hawaiians, it's not about leaving America, it's about finally being seen. Number 3, Alaska. Welcome to Alaska, the biggest and boldest of all the U.S. states. With more land than Texas, California, and Montana combined, Alaska feels like its own country already. And a good chunk of Alaskans would like to make that official. You might be surprised to hear this, but Alaska has one of the most active and long-standing independence movements in the country. Alaska is massive, over 663,000 square miles, yet home to just 731,000 people. That's roughly 1.1 people per square mile. Compare that to New Jersey, which crams 1,200 people per square mile. Alaskans value space, freedom, and self-reliance. And they don't like being told what to do by Washington, D.C., which is over 4,000 miles away. Enter the Alaskan Independence Party, AIP, a real political party that's been around since the 1970s. Their core belief? That Alaska never had a truly fair vote on whether to become a state in 1959. Some even argue that statehood was forced. At its peak, the AIP had over 20,000 registered members, making it the largest third party in Alaska. In fact, Alaska's former governor, Wally Hickel, was elected under their banner in 1990. Economically, Alaska's rich in oil, fishing, tourism, and minerals. The state produces over 470,000 barrels of oil per day, and many Alaskans receive an annual permanent fund dividend, a yearly check from oil revenues, which has ranged from $1,000 to over $2,000 per person. So the question some Alaskans ask is, why share all that wealth with the rest of the U.S.? Sure, Alaska receives heavy federal subsidies, especially for infrastructure and military presence. But the independent streak remains strong. Many residents are hunters, homesteaders, and adventurers who already live off the grid. They don't want interference. They want freedom. In the end, Alaska's independence movement isn't just about politics. It's about a mindset. It's about living wild and free in a land where the moose outnumber people and the northern lights dance over frozen mountains. If any state could survive as its own country, Alaska might just be the one. Number 2, California. California, where the beaches are golden, the startups are booming, and the independence movement is, well, surprisingly serious. Nicknamed Calexit, this movement isn't just another internet trend. It's rooted in real politics, big numbers, and one massive question: could the world's 5th largest economy survive on its own? Short answer: yes, and then some. Let's crunch some stats. California has nearly 39 million people, more than Canada. Its $3.9 trillion economy, as of 2023, would make it the fifth largest in the world, right behind Germany and ahead of India. It's the global headquarters of entertainment, hello, Hollywood, tech, Silicon Valley, and agriculture, over 13% of the U.S. agricultural output. That's a powerhouse of epic proportions. So what's fueling Calexit? A deep political divide. California's progressive values on climate change, immigration, gun laws, and healthcare often clash with federal policies. After the 2016 election, support for independence spiked. Groups like Yes California gained thousands of followers, even submitting a petition to get a secession vote on the 2019 ballot, though it was later withdrawn. Many Californians feel their tax dollars aren't used fairly. In 2022, California paid about $490 billion in federal taxes, yet saw less federal spending per capita compared to red states. That's like buying the pizza and only getting one slice. And don't forget, California already has its own everything: DMV, Constitution, military units, National Guard, even its own environmental regulations, stricter than federal law. There's even cultural fuel to the fire. Californians joke that we live in a different country already. From its massive Latino population to its innovation-driven economy, California often feels like a nation within a nation. And geographically, it's got ports, tech hubs, farmland, and Hollywood. What else do you need? But it's not all sunny dreams. Secession would face huge legal hurdles, economic realignment, and questions about federal land and military bases. Still, the fact that such a wealthy, influential state is even talking about independence shows just how deep the divide has grown. Whether it happens or not, Calexit is California doing what it does best: thinking big, going bold, and leading a movement that makes the rest of the country go, whoa, what if? Number 1, Texas. Texas, the heavyweight champion of state-level swagger and the only U.S. state that was once an independent nation by choice. That's right, from 1836 to 1845, Texas was the Republic of Texas, with its own president, army, and currency. And if you think Texans have forgotten, oh no. It's tattooed into the soul of every BBQ-loving, boot-wearing, flag-flying local. Here's the thing about Texas. It's not just big in size, 268,596 square miles, second only to Alaska. It's also big in population, over 30 million, economy, 2.35 trillion GDP, more than Canada, and natural resources. The state pumps out over 1.6 billion barrels of oil annually. If Texas went solo, it'd be the 9th largest economy in the world. Yeah, bigger than Brazil. So what's the deal with Texit, the Texas secession movement? Groups like Texas Nationalist Movement have pushed for a referendum to leave the U.S. They argue that Texas has the economic muscle, cultural pride, and political backbone to go it alone. In 2021, a bill was even filed in the Texas legislature to hold a secession vote, though it didn't make it to the floor. What's driving this? A mix of federal government frustration, gun rights debates, immigration issues, and taxation. Many Texans feel that Washington, D.C. doesn't speak for them, and with their own power grid, energy sector, military bases, and independent spirit, they say, "We've got this." But let's not ignore the challenges. Texas receives around $48 billion a year in federal aid and would need to manage border security, currency, trade, and defense on its own. Plus, secession is constitutionally murky at best. Still, Texit isn't a joke. Polls have shown that between 25% to 35% of Texans would support independence under the right conditions. That's millions of people who seriously think about waving goodbye to the stars and stripes and going back to their Lone Star roots. In short, Texas isn't just flirting with secession. It's got the history, the numbers, and the boldness to make it seem, well, not entirely impossible. If any state could pull it off, it's the one that already did.